prized kiwi fruit cuttings were smuggled from New Zealand into China and no one knows what to do about it. Kiwi fruit, aka Chinese gooseberries, are native to central and eastern China, but it was New Zealand that perfected the SunGold variety popular on supermarket shelves today. Yet one bloke, a kiwi thief if you will, is accused of smuggling cuttings of the prized SunGold variety to China's Sichuan province, enabling local farmers to cultivate several orchards of counterfeit plants. These illegal kiwi fruit orchards are spreading far and wide across China, like wildfire. But imagine if wildfire created trees instead of destroying them. But how New Zealand deals with this situation isn't so straightforward. This story of stolen SunGold Kiwifruit is about balancing both commercial and political risk and the complexities of doing business with China. Kiwifruit is big business for Australia's little brother. The humble fruit is New Zealand's largest fresh fruit export, valued at $2.3 billion in 2019, and a whopping 545,000 tonnes of kiwifruit exports were sent overseas, with 2/3 of that going to Asian countries. New Zealand even has a kiwifruit regulator that makes decisions on all national issues relating to the little furry fruit. But let me introduce Zespri. Zespri is the cooperative that owns the SunGold brand and the body that sells farmers the license to grow it. They are the world's largest marketer of kiwi fruit, selling to more than 59 countries and managing 30% of the global volume. China is their largest market, buying more than 100,000 tonnes of kiwis from the company every year and accounting for more than 20% of their global sales. But not all kiwi fruit is like the others. This is the SunGold Kiwifruit. Compared to its green friend, it has a bright and yellow inside, a tangy sweetness, and smoother flesh and fewer seeds. But consumers don't just love them, farmers do too. It has a stronger tolerance to a disease that devastated a previous variety of golden kiwi fruits, and they grow prolifically, meaning farmers get a really high yield off it as a crop, and it's even easy to pack when shipping. What's not to love? But Zespri Group own the rights to the SunGold Kiwifruit, which it began cultivating in the 2010s. And since the SunGold variety is the property of Zespri, anyone who wants to grow it has to cough up over $500,000 for the license to plant 1 hectare of the fruit. The payment is a one-off, and farmers also gain access to global supply chains and marketing campaigns. To the surprise of no one, the SunGold variety has become the golden child of the New Zealand kiwifruit family, selling the most trays across the world and driving the $3.5 billion in global sales Zespri made last financial year. But while New Zealand producers continue to grow and profit from their SunGold Kiwifruit as they have for years, plantations of counterfeit SunGold Kiwifruits are now bearing fruit all across China. And whilst these vines produce the same golden variety of kiwifruits, they are not licensed or held to the same quality standards as those grown by Zespri farmers in New Zealand. Zespri, realising the fruits of their labour being stolen, resolved to get to the root of the problem. Court documents tell the absurd story of how Zespri found out their kiwi fruits were being grown illegally in China. Like anything you don't want to hear, it started as a rumour. In 2016, Zespri's China-based staff had heard their SunGold Kiwifruit were being grown locally, so Zespri engaged private investigators and, on their advice, contacted a grower in China who openly admitted he was cultivating SunGold Kiwifruit. He even welcomed Zespri staff onto his orchard to see for themselves. No, I am not making this up. Eventually, they traced the source of illegal kiwis to Hao Yu Gao, who had bought a kiwifruit orchard in Opotiki, a tiny town in New Zealand's Bay of Plenty. According to court documents, he smuggled a precious cargo of buds to Sichuan, where he then hawked female sprouts for 60,000 New Zealand dollars a lot. Zespri took their grievances to the New Zealand High Court, who found that Gao had breached both New Zealand intellectual property law and his license agreement with Zespri, and Gao was ordered to pay $15 million in damages. The court result was a win on paper for Zespri, but did it really change anything? In 2020, Zespri estimated that there are around 5,400 hectares of unauthorised plantings in China, up from 2,500 hectares in 2019. For context, there are just over 8,000 hectares licensed in New Zealand, so the pressure is on Zespri to figure something out so they don't lose their livelihood. China's total kiwifruit industry currently extends over 250,000 hectares, meaning that assuming unauthorised plantings are even enforced in the first place, it's hard to even keep track of them. China is already the largest kiwi producer with an annual output reaching 2.5 million tonnes in 2018, and according to the most recent government data, China accounts for 55% of global kiwi production, which is over 13 times that of New Zealand. And not just a producer, China is one of the biggest consumers of the kiwi. In 2019, the country imported 123,000 tonnes, worth over $400 million. So this situation not only puts Zespri, but also New Zealand in a delicate spot. Zespri must work to defend its intellectual property and the value of its license, but China is also one of Zespri's biggest buyers of the real deal SunGold Kiwifruits. In Beijing, the legitimate SunGold Kiwifruit is popular, but Zespri believes that counterfeit fruits are not being sold in Tier 1 Chinese cities. There was a proposal last year on the table that would see some of the Chinese growers brought under the Zespri tent, effectively licensing the fruit from the stolen plants. Zespri thought the cooperation would be more effective in the long run, in terms of the fiscal health of the kiwifruit industry in New Zealand, rather than the confrontation, litigation, and other attempts to gain justice. Today, the value of New Zealand's trading relationship with China sits at about $19 billion a year, and while kiwifruits only make up a small portion of that, analysts are quick to point out how exposed the tiny nation is to the Asian superpower. The New Zealand government could make a larger issue out of this, but you only have to look at Australia for an example of what to expect if New Zealand were to criticise China too directly. The possibility of retribution is always there, and the Chinese could easily do without New Zealand's imports. Zespri's solution? If you can't beat them, join them, or at least buy them. In 2020, Zespri proposed a bold deal to their growers. Rather than going after illegal Chinese orchids, they could provide a year-long trial of buying up and marketing counterfeit kiwi fruit grown in China under the Zespri brand. Zespri wanted to use the trial to see if Chinese-grown fruit could meet its quality standards and to test whether or not Chinese consumers would be willing to pay a premium for the fruit without the Product of New Zealand sticker. Zespri growers were asked to vote on a proposal, with a threshold of 74% grower support needed for Zespri to continue with a commercial trial. Ultimately, it didn't hit, and what happens now? I'm about as confused as you are. But on the topic of kiwi fruits and China and New Zealand, someone is bound to bring up this argument sooner or later. Some people argue that New Zealand stole the kiwi fruit first, in the early 1900s, and that China has done nothing more than taking back what is rightfully theirs. But intellectual property law is there to protect those who invest in developing unique goods, which is what New Zealand has done with the SunGold variety of kiwi fruit. But the law isn't always easy to enforce in the global marketplace. In early 2020, Zespri announced that they were the first New Zealand company and the only fruit brand to secure key trademark protection status in Shanghai. But that only protects Zespri's branding, not the unique plants that the fruit grows on. So key trademark protection status sounds a lot like doesn't do diddly squat. The future of Zespri and their SunGold Kiwifruit is unclear, and there are a million different ways that this might play out. Zespri, in their latest annual report, gave some insight. Our focus now is continuing with our core business and gathering information to discuss possible next steps with growers. This will include continuing with our R&D, progressing our efforts to understand the local kiwi fruit production environment, and engaging further in China to better understand the unauthorised plantings, their potential impact, and possible ways forward. But to me, it sounds like they're talking a lot but aren't really saying anything. Maybe the best thing they can do is keep the New Zealand-China kiwi fruit trade on track and to simply grow a product that Chinese consumers love. If you've enjoyed this analysis from a half Kiwi bastard born across the ditch, you might like my video on the gambling scene in Australia. Be sure to feed the YouTube algorithm and support me by interacting either through a like, a comment, or subscribing to the channel. But until next time, have a good one.